The cockpit of the F-35C Lightning II is silent save for the mechanical hiss of the pilot's oxygen mask. Suddenly, the calm is shattered. 25,000 feet above the Persian Gulf, Iranian Khordad 15 surface-to-air missile batteries on the coast have achieved a hard lock. Two streaks of white smoke erupt from the Iranian shoreline, accelerating instantly to 3,000 miles per hour. The American pilot is pulling a 7G turn trying to pull the Iranian seekers away from the aircraft's exhaust. Behind him, his wingman isn't as lucky. A proximity fuse on the second Iranian missile triggers. A wall of tungsten shrapnel shreds the F-35C's horizontal stabilizer. The aircraft shudders violently. For weeks, we held back. We waited. We gave diplomacy every inch of the road, intending to postpone retaliation and find a way out of the spiral. Iran remained unyielding. They saw our restraint as a lack of resolve. In the Combat Information Center of the USS Arleigh, Burke, the commander, looks at the execute order that has been sitting on his terminal for 14 days. He turns the physical key. The vertical launch system cells on the foredeck explode into life, shedding their protective caps in a rain of fire. This is the counterpunch. For 21 days, the mission was simple: wait. The US and its allies intended to postpone any retaliation, moving a massive amount of hardware into the region to force Iran into an off-ramp. We played the hand of the restrained giant, hoping it would end the cycle. But Iran remained unyielding. They didn't see our patience as a strategy, they saw it as a weakness. The second news broke that an Iranian missile battery had successfully engaged and damaged a US aircraft, the time for holding back was deleted from the playbook. The transition happened in a heartbeat. On the flight deck of the USS Abraham Lincoln, the routine was instantly retasked. Before the main force could move toward their primary objectives, we had to blind the eyes of the coast. A flight of F/A-18E Super Hornets banked hard toward the Iranian shoreline, dropping to just 200 feet above the waves to stay beneath the horizon of the Iranian long-range search radars. As the coastal Khordad 15 batteries scrambled to reacquire their targets, the Americans struck first. They launched a volley of AGM-88 Harm. These weapons sniffed the air for the specific electronic scent of an enemy radar. The second, an Iranian operator, turned on his fire control system to lock a target. He unknowingly sent a homing signal to a missile traveling at Mach 2. The shoreline erupted in a series of jagged secondary explosions as the Harm missiles slammed into the radar bands, turning the Iranian integrated air defense system into outposts. We were proving that for every minute they spent targeting our aircraft, we would spend an hour dismantling their defenses. The strategy hit two tracks simultaneously: the bridge and the burn. The bridge was the logistical spine, the network of depots and command nodes Iran uses to feed its front lines. To shatter it, US B-1B Lancer bombers unleashed a massive volley of AGM-158 JASSM cruise missiles. These are terrain-hugging hunters that skim the Earth at 500 miles per hour. They stayed below the S-300 radar floor, navigating through Iranian valleys to decapitate the logistical bridgehead before the first alarm could even sound in Tehran. Operations like this are often told through the lens of the pilots, but they are won by the people in the shadows. If you've served in a combat information center, a tactical operations center, or worked a flight deck, or if you have a son or daughter out there right now holding that line, share your ship or unit in the comments. We talk about the machines, but we know it's the people who make the difference. You don't have to sink a fleet to stop a war, you just have to burn the money that pays for it. While the US hammered the logistical bridge, Israeli F-35I Adir squadrons executed a maneuver that defies conventional air doctrine. They didn't approach Asaluya from the sea where Iranian coastal radars expected them. Instead, they utilized a high-risk terrain masking profile, screaming through the Zagros Mountains, staying just 50 feet above the rock to remain invisible to long-range sensors. Iran's air defense operators at Asaluya saw nothing but ghosting on their screens. Moments before the Adir jets reached the target, Israeli ground-based units and USEA-18G Growlers flooded the Iranian frequencies with digital noise, making the S-300 batteries believe a massive formation of heavy bombers was approaching from the opposite direction. While the Iranian crews swiveled their launchers toward the sea to meet a threat that didn't exist, the real predators were already popping up from behind the mountain ridges directly behind them. The target was the Asaluya petrochemical complex, the regime's economic heart. If this site stops, the cash flow to every proxy in the Middle East dries up instantly. The Israeli pilots didn't aim for the storage tanks; those are easily replaced. They hunted the long lead items, the massive custom-built distillation towers. These 200-foot steel giants operate under cataclysmic pressure. Israel's cleverness lay in the sequence of the release. They deployed the Spice 2000 with a delayed fuse logic. The first wave of munitions didn't explode on impact. They utilized hardened penetrator tips to punch through 15 feet of reinforced concrete and steel, burying themselves deep into the subterranean gas feed manifolds. Seconds later, the internal scene-matching computer triggered the detonation. The result was a terrifying industrial backfire. By rupturing the pressurized manifolds from below, while the towers were at peak operation, the Israelis turned the facility's own internal pressure into a weapon. The distillation towers acted like giant pipe bombs exploding from the inside out. A localized sun erupted over the Persian Gulf, a thermal bloom so intense it scorched the paint off Iranian patrol boats miles offshore. Just as the Iranian emergency crews scrambled to contain the inferno, the U.S. delivered the trap. From the deck of the USS Arleigh Burke, a swarm of Tomahawk Block 5 cruise missiles arrived. They slammed into the seawater intake valves, the massive pumps required to cool the entire facility. By destroying the cooling infrastructure while the site was already melting down, the US and Israel ensured the entire complex suffered a total thermal seizure. The steel structures warped and fused together in the heat. Even if Iran had the billions required to rebuild, the ground itself was turned into a graveyard of molten glass and twisted metal. The bridge to their economy wasn't just burned. The foundation was erased before the first Iranian radar could even achieve a solid lock. Desperation is a weapon that often explodes in the hand of the person holding it. Iran did not sit idle while their economic future went up in smoke. As the fires at Assaluya lit up the horizon, the order went out from Tehran overnight: deploy everything, pursue and counterattack. But there is a massive difference between a planned operation and a desperate scramble. This was an urgent deployment phase, and in the military world, urgent is often a synonym for catastrophic. Iranian crews were woken up in the middle of the night and told to move their mobile launchers out of their missile cities, deep underground tunnels, and into firing positions along the coast. Under the pressure of a coordinated US-Israeli strike, the friction of war began to take its toll. We observed multiple equipment failures on our satellite feeds. In one instance, an Iranian Fateh 110 short-range ballistic missile suffered a Stage 1 ignition failure while still on the rail. Instead of flying toward a target, the missile turned into a 30-foot blowtorch, incinerating the launch vehicle and the crew before it could even leave the ground. However, volume is its own kind of quality. Even with these errors, Iran has a deep magazine of backup missiles. They began a saturated counterattack, launching a swarm of Shahed 136 loitering munitions and Qayyam-1 ballistic missiles. They were spraying and praying, trying to overwhelm the US and Israeli integrated air defenses through sheer numbers. The Iranian strategy was simple and brutal. If you hit our economy, we will hit your fleet. They targeted the bridge of our naval presence, launching dozens of anti-ship cruise missiles like the Noor and the Ghadir. They were pursuing us with everything they had left, moving their backup missiles from central depots toward the coast, under the cover of the thick black smoke rising from Assaluya. An uncoordinated counterattack, no matter how large, is just a series of targets for a professional kill chain. Because the US and Israel were operating on a pre-planned strategy, our defensive layers were already cocked and locked before the first Iranian missile cleared its silo. The USS Arleigh Burke and the USS Gravely moved into what we call a shotgun formation, protecting the high-value assets. They began a systematic turkey shoot using the Standard Missile-6. As the Iranian Qayyam-1 ballistic missiles reached the apex of their flight, the Israeli Arrow 3 system took over. The Arrow 3 is a marvel of engineering. It operates in exo-atmospheric space, meaning it hits the target while it is still outside the Earth's atmosphere. At those altitudes, there is no air, so the interceptor uses hit-to-kill technology. It simply slams into the incoming missile at 5,000 miles per hour. The energy alone is like being hit by a freight train moving at Mach 6. The Iranian resistance was fierce, but it was fundamentally disorganized. They were firing backup missiles that had been sitting in storage for years. Many of them suffered from stale fuel or guidance errors, falling harmlessly into the sea or being easily spoofed by the electronic warfare suites of our EA-18G Growlers. Our coordination turned their overwhelming force into a series of expensive failed experiments. By the time the sun rose over the Persian Gulf, the Iranian counterattack had stalled. They had expended a massive portion of their surge capacity for almost zero tactical gain. They hadn't sunk a single ship. They hadn't downed a single additional aircraft. Meanwhile, the heart of their economy was a blackened ruin. Just as the Iranian counterattack seemed to falter, they played their most desperate card, saturation masking. They knew they couldn't beat the USS Arleigh Burke in a fair fight, so they tried to break its brain. Iran launched hundreds of low-tech engine-powered drones mixed with thousands of radar-reflective decoys. The goal was to clog the American SPY-1D radar with so much digital noise that a single high-speed Khalij-Fars anti-ship ballistic missile could slip through the chaos unnoticed. Because if the Arleigh Burke fired, it would empty its magazines. If it didn't, it risked a direct hit. But instead of going active and lighting up the sky with fire, the destroyer's crew engaged the AN/SLQ 32V6 electronic warfare suite. That means instead of pushing white noise to drown out the drones, the system harvested the unencrypted control signals the Iranians were using to loiter the swarm. The US technicians didn't just block the drones, they hijacked the frequency. The moment happened in the space of 3 seconds. The hijacked Iranian swarm suddenly performed a 180-degree turn. The drones programmed to seek out the largest metallic radar signature in their vicinity found one of the Iranian coastal launch barges that had sent them. While the Iranian crews were still celebrating their saturation tactic, their own weapons were screaming back toward them at 120 miles per hour. Simultaneously, a Qadr-class midget sub attempted a cold-launch torpedo attack from the shadows of a nearby oil rig, hoping to catch the destroyer while it was distracted by the drones. The USS Arleigh Burke didn't even turn its hull. It deployed a Mark 54 lightweight torpedo in snapback mode. But instead of a direct hit, the US used an acoustic mimic decoy. The torpedo emitted a sound signature that perfectly replicated the engine noise of the Iranian midget sub. The smoke over Asaluya is a message that doesn't need a translator. It tells the world that the time for postponing and waiting is over. We spent weeks trying to avoid it, holding back our most advanced systems to give peace a chance. But when the Iranian regime decided to lock onto American aircraft and fire, they signed the warrant for their own economic collapse. Iran still has backup missiles. They will certainly try to resist again, and they will likely try to find new ways to strike back. But the next time they will have to ask a very hard question: is the cost of the next lock worth the loss of the next city? Because we've shown them the math. And in the logic of modern warfare, sequence beats firepower every single time. We'll see you in the next one. Disclaimer, we respect the truth, and this video is our way of dramazing a real event to give the audience a detailed look and convey it to you in a compelling way. However, in addition, some elements of the video also present a hypothetical scenario and are not a factual report of a real event. All events, dialogues, and character emotions depicted are fictional, built on publicly available information about real-world military capabilities and geopolitical tensions. Thank you.